Trinomials. So if you remember from our very first review lesson in this unit, we looked at coming up with numbers that would multiply to give us one number and add to give us another number. And this is where that strategy and those skills are going to come in handy. So first of all, you need to know what is a trinomial. Well, we're going to look at trinomials in the form of x squared plus bx plus c. So we're going to factor trinomials when our value in front of your x is going to be a 1, or in some cases we can common factor first and then factor a form that looks like this. So this can be easily factored once you find a pair of numbers that both multiply together to give you the value of c, and those same two numbers will add together to give you b. So it truly is something that really stretches your brain and forces you to remember those mental math strategies and those multiplication skills. So we want to think about, for example, 1 by finding all of the factors that multiplied to give us 6. So remember, the factors of 6 are pairs of numbers that multiply together. And in this case, we want a positive 6 because it's plus 6. So this tells us that either both numbers are going to be positive, because remember, two positive numbers, when we multiply them together, will give us a positive value, and also two negative numbers, when we multiply them together, will give you a positive value. So they're either both going to be positives or both going to be negatives. So what numbers multiply to give us 6? Well, it's 1 and 6, but remember they could be negative 1 and 6, and 2 and 3, or negative 2 and negative 3. So they're either both positives or they're both negatives in this case. So once we've identified all of our factors of 6, we need to think about which one of these pairs together will add up to give us positive 5. 1 plus 6 gives us 7. That doesn't work. Negative 1 take away 6 is negative 7. That doesn't work. 2 plus 3, that gives us 5. So this is going to be the set of numbers that will work in our case. So 2 plus 3 will give us 5. And now what we need to do is we want to write the factors, including the signs, inside of brackets. So what happens is that if these are positive values, they're going to have plus signs. If these are going to be negative values, they're going to have negative signs. If they're one of each, they're going to be one of each. So when we're factoring an expression, it turns into, for example, if I was going to factor this, it might look like x plus r and then x plus s, where these r and the s are the numbers that make this work. So r times s gives us 6, and r plus s gives us b, for example. So my factors are now going to be x plus 2 in this case, and x plus 3 in that case. So now I can say that x squared plus 5x plus 6 is the same as x plus 2 times x plus 6. Well, how do I know this is right? Well, I can check my answer by using FOIL. So again, if you're at home and you want to check your answers to make sure that you're on the right track, this is the strategy that you would use to check those solutions. So I'm going to have FOIL this. So x times x is x squared. So my first two terms. Outside, x times 3 is 3x. Inside, 2 times x is 2x. And last, 2 times 3 is 6. Add my two middle terms together, x squared plus 5x plus 6. That's what I started with. So I know I've done this correctly. So these are the factors so this would be my solution, and this is my check. Okay. So let's go through a few more examples. So example number 2. So ask yourself, what two numbers will multiply to give me 20 and add to give me negative 9? So let's list our possible integer factors for 20. So remember, I'm getting a positive 20, so they're either both positive numbers or they're both negative numbers. So let's start with 1. 1 times 20 gives me 20, or they could both be negatives. Then go by 2. So 2 times 10 gives me 20. Remember, those could both be negatives. 3 times 20, no, 3 times nothing gives me 20. 4 times 5, or they could both be negatives. And I don't need to go any further because there's my 5. So 5 would be 5 times 4, and then nothing else will work other than these 3 sets. Okay, so which pair of these add up to give you negative 9? So 1 plus 20 is 21, that doesn't work. Negative 1, take away 20, negative 21, that doesn't work. 2 plus 10 is 12, nope. Negative 2, take away 10 is negative 12, nope. 4 plus 9, or 4 plus 5 is 9, that's close. Negative 4 plus negative 9 is negative 9, yeah. So that's the set that we're going to use in this question. So negative 4 and negative 5. So now I can say that x squared minus 9x plus 20 is the same as writing x take away 4 in one bracket and x take away 5 in another bracket. So this is my solution. And then how do I check? I can check by using FOIL. So first, x times x is x squared. Outside, x times negative 5 is negative 5x. Inside, negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And last, negative 4 times negative 5 is positive 20. Combine my middle terms. Negative 5 times negative, or take away negative 4 is negative 9x. And that is what I started with. So I know I've done this correctly. So from now on, I want you to think about when you're factoring a trinomial, you want to choose two numbers that add to give you the middle number and multiply to give you the last number. But it's always easier to think about those products or those first before you think about your addition. So let's do a couple more examples. We won't check these answers here. So what numbers will multiply to give you negative 6? Remember, if it's a negative number, then it's going to be one of each. Okay, so that's the only way your product is going to be negative. So what numbers multiply to give us 6? Well, 1 and negative 6, or negative 1 and 6. And then I have 2 and negative 3, or negative 2 and 3. And those are the only factors that I have that will give me negative 6. So which one of these sets of numbers will add up to give you negative 5? And the only one of these is our first one, actually. So then this becomes x plus 1, because our 1 was positive, and x minus 6. And then the last one, we always want to think about if this number in front of your x squared is something other than 1, you want to do a greatest common factor first. So sometimes we need to look for a greatest common factor. And what is our greatest common factor? Well, what is a number that will divide evenly into all of these? That's 2. And do they both all have a letter? No. So then we know that our greatest common factor is 2. And remember, when we're common factoring, we write our greatest common factor out front and then the remainder inside of our bracket. So I'm going to have 2 out front, And then what do I have when I divide each of these terms by 2? Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I'm left with x squared. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I'm left with positive x. And negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. And now I want to multiply or find two numbers that will multiply to give me negative 6. And again, just like before, I have the only way I can get a product that's going to be negative is if I have one of each. So I can use the same list of numbers that I had for example 3. So I could have 1 and negative 6, or I could have negative 1 and 6. I could have 2 and negative 3, or I could have negative 2 and 3. And which one of these will add to give me positive 1? This one gives me negative 5. This one gives me positive 5. This one gives me negative 1. The last set gives me positive 1. So then it becomes, I still write my greatest common factor out front, and then I break up this trinomial into two binomials. So it becomes x minus 2, because that's my first value, and then x plus 3. And then this would be factored fully. So I always keep my greatest common factor out front and then break up that trinomial into two binomials. If you have any questions about factoring trinomials, please post your questions in the appropriate discussion board or send me an email.